This is That So Second Millennium, where we explore issues at the interface between science, philosophy, and Catholic theology. I'm your host, Paul Giesting, and your co-host is Bill Schmitt.
Welcome back to episode 146 of That So Second Millennium. So this episode marks the beginning of a hiatus for That So Second Millennium. We've been doing this for 4.5 years, and this episode involves Bill and I taking a look back at what we've talked about, the themes we've hit over the last 4.5 years. And after a span of time like that, it's simply good to pause for a minute and retool. So can't make any promises exactly when this will be back and in exactly what form. But we appreciate your listenership over the years. This will obviously continue to be up. The audio feed for That's So Second Millennium will continue to be up indefinitely, no matter what happens. So we hope you go back and listen to some previous episodes, give us your feedback, and hope that you yourselves have gotten something out of this so far, and that you are motivated to think about your life in fewer watertight compartments. Don't keep your faith and your science, your day-to-day life separate from one another. So with that, here is episode 146 of That So Second Millennium.
Well, I'm very happy for you to start the conversation by introducing the kind of concept for this episode and all of that. And
well, sure. Although, as I recall, it was mostly your idea, Bill.
But
you wanted to do a retrospective episode. So it's the time has come to do some rethinking, as is in any project like this. And so we're going to pause after this episode and do a little rethinking and recalibrating. So we're just going to pause and celebrate the fact that we've been doing this without a pause, although we have gone down to once a month episodes, but we've been doing this since April 2nd, 2018 is what you put in there, and that's probably right, because I probably decided that April 1st was not an auspicious day to start anything.
That was very wise. Yeah.
It's my cousin's birthday, but most people don't realize that. Most people
so April 2nd was good. Yeah.
Just April Fool's Day.
But that is more than 4.5 years ago.
Oh gosh, the world was a different place, wasn't it? And
it
we were
was
both in very different places in our lives, living in different places.
Well said, that's right. We were in different places. Yeah. But what has not changed is the basic vision of the show that you really started out with, that you created this wonderful beast of a podcast that has been persistent and wandering the world with great interest and great potential. And I think a lot of the potential has been achieved. But yeah, you're right. There's always time for a pause too. Yeah,
it's a project that I want to get more people involved with is probably the primary thing on my mind. So looking for that and figuring out a way to do that going forward.
Fair enough. I tried to develop multiple personalities so that you would feel
for conversation partners. Yeah.
Yes. Now there's a concept for a podcast.
Oh yeah. Oh my. Do some research and find out if that's being done somewhere and what subject matter. Because probably not the same subject matter. The idea
it might not be.
Yeah.
It might not be. Yeah. But the case is still the same, that we did cover a whole lot of ground, and we did talk with a lot of different people.
There have been some amazing people who have said yes to being on this little podcast. That's definitely true. So, Bob Spitzer and Brother Consolmagno. I mean, obviously, they're some of my favorites because they're in science.
Yes.
But and of course, the fact that I got to interview a few of my old professors, Jill Pesteris and Dan Hoffmeister, that was a lot of fun, especially talking to Jill. Knowing that Jill is a Christian scientist in the small s form of scientist.
Right.
and finally, it kind of gave a great reason to have a conversation I've always wanted to have with her.
That's neat.
About what it's like, kind of even in geology, even in mineralogy, where there's not the same level of, biology is one thing, where there really is this entrenched atheistic party line that people are encouraged to toe. And geology is not like that. But there's still this sort of sense like, well, that's not a subject for decent conversation.
Yeah.
That by the mid 20th century we had sort of fallen into.
That's right.
And that's really, obviously that's part of why this podcast exists. And
that's right.
I can only imagine that that's a reason why so many people have said yes to coming on the podcast, is that they realize this division needs to break down. It needs to be broken down and bridged over. And eventually this ground needs to be like, there needs to not even be a bridge there. It just needs to be, I walk from one thing to the other and I didn't realize that I, passed some sort of militarized barrier. Yeah. There need not to be barbed wire and armed guards and, attack dogs and all the stuff that it seems like there is between science and religion these days.
Right. Yeah. Instead of the castles, the medieval castles of old, we have cancellations and we have silos and specializations and prohibitions against people talking about certain things. It's really been sad, but all the more reason to do a podcast. And you're right, it has led to the success of getting all sorts of people to discuss all sorts of things.
A lot of those people were associated with the Society of Catholic Scientists, which is a thing that you put me on to, and that was already, at that point, it too was in its infancy. I guess both the podcast and the Society of Catholic Scientists are in their toddlerhood, or even, getting ready to go to kindergarten now. But
right, yeah. Well, you really provided groundbreaking coverage of the first national conference of the Society of Catholic Scientists, right, in 2018.
Back in DC, yeah, they had a conference in Chicago. I think they had a lot more people in DC. So
right.
So the 2017 conference I didn't get to see, but
I see.
Yeah, having been to each of them, so I'm debating whether I want to go from Wyoming out to the East Coast for next summer's conference. But gosh, it'd be nice. It's still a good time, and it's a good opportunity to meet people, talk to people. Yeah.
And that those conferences are another example of people getting a lot of joy out of meeting other people with whom they can discuss everything, and to have that sense of freedom that nothing is off limits.
Yeah. Not having to silo off that part of things. And, because then that's the sad, reality of human society, is that most of the time we seem to spend most of our time with people who we have to have these boundaries in place. There you go. That's the word I'm groping for. Not barricades necessarily, but boundaries. Like, no, I'm not going to talk to this person about this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
But hopefully we have spouses and family members, friends, maybe people that we have to go out and deliberately meet to talk to about the way things actually are. Both negative. Many times it's something negative that we need someone's help with.
Right.
But in the case of the Society of Catholic Scientists, it's something positive that, who wants to share this beautiful thing and just have it fall flat on the floor.
Right.
It's faith, and then seeing the boundaries, seeing the intersection between what we do, searching out new truth about the material universe, and then our faith, our outlook on life, the paradigm that we live in personally.
Right. Yeah. And this came out in our last episode, that once you find one point of intersection between different people's journeys, especially if those journeys are fundamentally about faith, you find that you suddenly have a starting point to journey more with other people, because you at least agree on some common terms of references and some shared truths.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I can't help my takeaway still from Paul Semgo's Chung's book and our conversation is that we all have some sort of common ground. It's easy to get into. It's easy to get depressed and think that we have such huge differences, that we live in completely different worlds, that it's, that we're just going to have to become so cosmically lucky to find, a point of intersection between ourselves and other people. Right. I think that puts it a little too negatively.
Yeah.
And in particular, and he touches on this in his book, but I can't shake the feeling that modern secular progressivism is just I want to be cautious with that word, but I just can't escape the conviction that to a large extent, it's really Christianity that's gotten fed up with Christianity. That it's the West. It comes from the West. It's a Western phenomenon. There is no other, great intellectual cultural tradition that is of primary importance in shaping it.
Right.
It may grab some pieces here and there. It may, a little warmed over Buddhism or, something from Chinese thought. I can't even imagine what from traditional Chinese thought it actually borrows. But it's really a Western thing. Right. And that means that it's been funneled through 1,500 years of Christianity.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so there's got to be something behind it. And of course, there were problems. That's the whole point of the last 400 years or so, is that the problems inherent in the intellectual world of the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It did have these awful contradictions that needed to be penetrated and lanced and dealt with in some way. And, we kind of wish we'd dealt with them in a less destructive way than we did.
Right.
But but there's still something behind that. Why is progressivism's goal? Basically to be nice to people, right? That's what progressivism believes it's doing by, say, promoting, that teenagers should be able to, surgically and hormonally try to change their sex because we're basically trying to be nice to them. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, the whole question is whether that's actually, and the terms of the debate is that actually a kindness or not? The terms of the debate are not whether we care about these people. Of course we care about these people because we're Christian.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right.
Whether we let ourselves remember it anymore. Yeah.
Yes. And that alone would be a wonderful common ground for us all to rediscover in this country right now. I liked the way in our very first episode, you mentioned that synthesis was deemed possible starting in the 12th and 13th centuries. And there's no reason why it really needed to fall apart. I guess you're hitting one reason, namely that somehow our mode of thinking shifted from intellect and reasoning to emotions, feelings, and being nice to each other as the very basis of social bonding.
That's one aspect of it. Yeah. I suspect that was a little later down the line. It wasn't the immediate issue. Again, our last episode just, actually kind of revisits this question as well, because he makes the claim that Aquinas derived the synthesis, and basically no one understood what he was doing. That's a cautionary interpretation of what his accomplishment was. Perhaps it was not until the 19th century with Leo XIII reviving study in Thomas that we began to have a chance to actually appreciate him at what he was actually doing. Hopefully we're coming to understand what he was actually doing.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
yeah. But in Paul Chung's analysis, for the most part, people continued to be either, thinking kind of like Augustine in their theological thought, or like Aristotle in their quote scientific thought.
Right.
And then, of course, that went off to the races, and then people rebelled against Aristotle in the 16th and 17th centuries.
Right.
But in the 17th century, really, the Aristotelian worldview was turned over, and then we went off on this sort of. Well, I mean, Descartes' part of it. It's kind of hard to say exactly who, midwifed this whole, the worldview of the Enlightenment, the 18th century.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
Descartes had some role to play in it. Lots of other people did. Newton obviously did. Newton was already responding to developments in Descartes, and Descartes was responding to other people's developments, as is always the case. But yeah.
So, in other words, when people nowadays try to figure out the polarization of today and trace it back, I don't know, to the 10 years ago, or particular election cycles, or the 60s, or other periods of time, it's again one of those perfect storms that really was brewing way back, and everything is incremental, and things happen gradually until they happen suddenly. And maybe the sudden is where we are now.
Yeah, the 20-year overnight success, or Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire." It's been burning since the world's been turning, which that's fair. I mean, that's basically, that's original sin. Whether Billy Joel is letting himself remember that he's Catholic, or had some sort of Catholic influence on his upbringing, and realizes that, yes, in fact, the fire has been burning since the world's been turning, because we've always been imperfect. We've always been flawed. We've always needed a savior.
Well, I'm so glad that you're inserting the music of my favorite popular music idol of all times, Billy Joel, into this conversation, because he does talk about synthesis. He has a way of making deep points in still very popular music with a good hook and lyrics. Yes,
that's true. It's true. Yeah, there's. It's not coincidental that. Gosh, I remember going on a retreat in high school, and one of the songs that they played was "In the Middle of the Night," right?
Huh.
Which is a song about, it's pretty easy at least to read into it an idea of, spiritual longing and what the heck is life about, and all that sort of thing. So, which was the first time I'd heard that song. Since
That's interesting.
It was not on my parents' cassette of Billy Joel's greatest hits, so I did not know about it yet. But I found out about that. Yeah.
Also interesting, because my first high school reunion, my first high school retreat, which happened in the 70s, they played a piece, in fact, the opening piece from Bernstein's Mass, which is an adaptation of a couple of Psalms. And the whole theme is God is the simplest of all. And that just captured my attention, and probably shaped my faith more than anything, including my moving more toward a Franciscan spirituality. And sometimes maybe that's one way to transcend all of the silos, even though we've, I think, benefited from going into the details on lots of different issues. And ultimately, the detailed knowledge of all of these different disciplines is the way to set us straight. In a sense, too, it's really important to just keep things simple, right? Who was it who said, keep it simple, stupid? Somebody said that. Probably it's not in the Bible. I don't know where it's from.
It's not quite in Scripture. I happen to know that 12-step spirituality uses that phrase. I don't know if they originated it or not. Yeah.
Oh, fascinating.
Just like the Serenity Prayer.
Indeed, yes. Yeah. Yeah, take one step at a time, and that's indeed what all of these different disciplines are doing. But if the steps are along a trajectory that's pulling them apart, that's no progress. If we all could take one step at a time on a trajectory that brings us closer together, that would be pretty good. And if our podcast can contribute in some small way to that, then we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done. I mean, the idea of, that maybe Thomas Aquinas developed his synthesis. He saw the need, and then other people didn't take him up on it, remained in their simplistic worldview. That's very much a cautionary tale.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet it's not impossible for things to get better, at least. Whether the entire world comes along for the ride at any point is another question. But
right.
Yeah, trying to do what we can for those of us who are interested in the question, just who have some sort of willingness at least to consider the idea that maybe the world is not actually fundamentally splintered into these, that as a matter of fact, so one take is the idea, straight materialism, there is no meaning to anything, it's Richard Dawkins all the way down, and we're just the product of blind chemical circumstances, and anything else we've ever dreamed up is just somehow our neurons creating these bizarre phantoms. That's one way. That's at least somewhat logically consistent. People can and have poked holes even in that, because it doesn't actually do justice to reality. But
that's right.
In a sense, it's better because it forces you to look at these flaws than the mindset of, I'm going to behave one way in this sphere of my life, and I'm going to behave another way in this other sphere of my life. And who knows how many 4, 5, 10 different spheres I might have where I basically carry on as if I believe different things.
Yes. Fascinating. Yeah, I've heard it said that being atomized, the atomization of individuals as kind of islands unto themselves has been a big problem of where our culture has been going. But in a sense, it's even worse than that, because not only are we atomized from each other, but we're almost atomized within ourselves. We categorize, the part of ourselves that's on Facebook and looks good all the time, and the part of ourselves that's struggling in different ways that we will or will not weaponize or give voice to.
That's a real, that's understood to be a real psychological problem, that we have parts of ourselves that don't even talk to each other.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Even within ourselves. Yeah.
Do you think it was ever so, or was there a way that, say, during that time of synthesis that started centuries ago, it was easier?
So much of this is just how we deal with other people in general, and so we've always experienced social pressures, and found ourselves, many people at least. Gosh, who was I listening to just about Henry VIII?
Yeah.
Somebody, just thinking how he apparently had a reputation for behaving very differently in different situations.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He could be very, he killed a lot of his best friends.
Yes, including wives, yeah.
Right, wives, Thomas More, one of his best friends and counselors,
Horrible.
And yet, of course, at the same time, he could be a very jovial, friendly, open, outgoing, generous person in other circumstances. And
amazing.
So what was going on, One, what did he internalize from, so he was the son of Henry VII, and Henry VII had, his eyes over his shoulder his entire reign, because he was, he was kind of a Johnny-come-lately upstart, and there were however many people in England who arguably had a better, reason to be king than him, by lines of descent. So, that sort of thing gets passed down. And yet, so, one is the influenced by all sorts of things. You go to church and you hear one thing. Heck, you go to church and you hear multiple things. I mean, just to bring it back to the present, right? The idea of we're all really trying to achieve Christian goals. We're just trying to do it without, in some cases, we're trying to do it without any reference to the grace that, is cooked into Christianity as such that we, the recognition that we need it, because that's the reality, is that we need something beyond ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And now people are trying to find the transcendent reality within themselves, or within what they consider to be the reality that they can define for themselves.
Right. And if they could actually, if they're consciously looking inside themselves and willing to be surprised by what they find there, I mean, that could still be a way of accessing God. But
that's right.
Yeah. I wonder how many people really can carry the delusion along with them that they're making things up. I mean, so much of it, I think, just kind of goes on under the surface. I guess I hope that's the case for their sake.
Right. And they want to avoid debating that issue, and hence they don't really want to hear the other side of any story. And of course, I'm probably being overly harsh. I think there are a number of people who tend to influence and even lead that overall macro discussion, and take that kind of very self-centered approach strategically. But I think most people are just like us, and they're searching for meaning themselves. And in lieu of God, they are finding some sense of meaning in the talking points handed down from the political donors and other influencers of various sorts.
Influencers of various sorts, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of them. But.
Yeah. And now I think in the polls that they conduct of high schoolers and college kids, don't a lot of people say that their career goal is to be an influencer? Oh my goodness.
I've heard that. There's no way for 10% of the population to be influencers, let alone 50%.
That's right.
Oh, jeez.
That's right. By the way, that leads into just one or two questions that I wanted to ask you to kind of sum up what we've been doing. And one of them is, of course, our ties to the to respective colleges and academic experiences, although this podcast started because we were both involved in very different ways at University of Notre Dame, you as a PhD student and me as a communications staff member. But now our affiliations are with, yours is with Wyoming Catholic College in Lander, right?
Wyoming, yes.
Lander, Wyoming. And mine has been with Holy Cross College in Notre Dame, across the street from the University of. Mm-hmm. And I think one reason why we're both hopeful ultimately and why we're doing what we're doing is because we have hope that Catholic education is one way to help us stay on roughly parallel trajectories, or at least trajectories that might merge down the line.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about what we try to do at this college, I mean, it's the goal is to not have this huge gulf between ourselves and the past, and therefore between different aspects of our humanity, right? So that literature exists for a reason, philosophy exists for a reason. We can't replace them all with science. That's it's not as if those were all just, poor early attempts at science, and now we have the real thing.
Right.
Some people say that about theology, which is just it's a refusal to deal with the actual details of the question. It's to fundamentally mistake what the purpose of theology is, or for that matter, the purpose of philosophy. And to miss that everyone has a philosophy. It's just a question of whether it's been looked at consciously or thought through.
Good point. Yeah. And I'm not even sure people even realize that. Many people don't even realize that they have a philosophy, that they've chosen something that gives them a definitive meaning in their life. I'm afraid that so many people just, do it in a utilitarian way that they don't even realize they've decided something. Almost by deciding nothing, they've decided something.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and lost all ability to check the decision and try to make it well. So,
yeah. But I am hopeful that re-exposure to the classic liberal arts and exposure to faith and a sense of there is a reality and there is a truth, and that faith in God is a real anchor that both informs and transcends the humdrum reality of everyday life. I think there really is hope in that. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if we have a vacuum of that, if indeed it's true, and I know it is, that our hearts were made for God, and that they're restless until they come back to God, I'm hopeful that people will see that there's a vacuum right now, and that we can return to lots of interesting reality that actually brings us together.
Yes, yeah, brings us together and brings us to what we're meant to be.
Well said. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In other words, it's the cure to both of those problems, that we're atomized amongst ourselves and within ourselves. That is a real problem. But yeah, may Catholic education continue. May our role in it continue. And we should also say that even though we're taking a hiatus from this, shall we remind our listeners and other listeners who are surely going to crop up over time, partly because of the great guests we've been grateful to have on. We're going to have all of these episodes online archived still, right? And people will be able to go back and visit them.
Yeah. This is just a pause. So, the hosting's not going anywhere. The episodes aren't going anywhere. The feed's not going anywhere. So, this is just a necessary pause to sort of retool and rethink about things. So,
very good, and probably that's something that everybody should consider at various points in their life.
The unexamined life is not worth living, they say. I think that's
wow, exactly right. Yes. The unexamined podcast is not worth doing.
That's right.
How about that?
Right. We could.
So. Yes, and if that winds up in some list of famous quotes, please spell my name correctly. No,
that's right. Oh gosh, yeah, and it's a good thing you said it, because then they'd have the question of spelling my name correctly, and that's really that's almost impossible. So,
well, you've been such an excellent podcast producer and creator and host that I think it will be an important part of your legacy while you build many other parts of it. And I have a feeling that your name will be both spelled correctly and otherwise remembered. Maybe just because it's such a darn hard name to
That's right.
spell.
Once you've engaged,
for many other reasons.
Once you've engaged with the difficulty of it, you have a certain pride in it, right?
Was there anything else you wanted to say about the episode, or how you're doing your kind of hiatus pondering, things that are top of your mind?
I'm going on a retreat this weekend, so there are two young, I guess I think of them as young, they're probably in their 30s. That's the terrible thing about getting old, Bill. You probably
I know, young is redefined.
Yeah, but
right.
they are starting a religious order here in Lander, and they are putting on a discernment retreat, and apparently they have so impressed our local bishop that he's coming from Cheyenne to spend the weekend with us. So we will have Mass on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I guess, with Bishop Stephen, and we'll have some time to think about Yeah, all of us. I think there's about 30 people going on this retreat.
Wow.
For all of us for various reasons, things to discern. So this is one of the things that will be on my mind, one of many, as you said.
Wow.
So
I did not know that. That's exciting. Yeah, and blessings on that effort. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that introspective time of year in the wintertime when, here's another year that's come and gone. What should be different in the year to come? Certainly thinking and praying about that in Mass today for All Saints Day.
Indeed. Beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
And how are you doing there in New York? Just
very well. Yeah. Having moved from South Bend back to the homelands of New York has been stimulating, and it's given me chances to get back into more freelance writing for Catholic newspapers or Catholic blogs, including the Tablet in the Brooklyn diocese. And continuing to do this podcast has been a great source of strength and continuity for me. And I'm also involved, as I was in South Bend, I'm also involved in Catholic radio. I think both of us are just natural Catholic communicators. So probably one way or another, that synergy between us will continue. And I'm very happy to be a champion for Catholic communications. And in fact, I'm very happy that at Holy Cross College, the Academic Council has approved a Catholic media track that their bachelor's students can take as a kind of career trajectory. And that too is aiming for a synthesis, which is between religion and all of the many communications arts and skills. And I think it's going to be a very necessary career, especially as the boomer generation retires.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that spreading the message through the modern technology and also through the good old wisdom that we had that has to be passed along from 2,000 years of church wisdom. Hopefully that will be appreciated ongoingly.
Yeah.
There's plenty of podcasts out there that do that. But I've felt, and I know you've felt very strongly about that, making that connection between science and religion.
Yeah. Just trying to build that comfort level. That's
right.
A podcast can do certain things. It can't really do others. It's not a format for lectures. It's not a format for getting across abstract information. But I think it's very good at generating a sort of comfort, a sort of, getting used to the idea of thinking of these things together rather than separately.
Very good point. I like that word comfort because I think that might have been another achievement that we had, not to be boastful, but just to appreciate the graces that have been given to us. We've had a pretty good ability to make each other comfortable as co-hosts and to make our guests comfortable talking about just about anything, right?
Right.
And if the comfort level can be increased, then our contribution is already solid.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of, I think where I'd like to leave it for today. So
very good. Yeah.
We will see what comes in the future. Try to be open to what the Spirit is actually prompting each of us to do, and we will see what form that takes.
Very good, and all the best to our listeners and future listeners who come upon the various episodes. Should we remind everybody it's that's so secondmillennium.net, right?
Yes. If you come across this separately from the feed, you can find the show notes and all of the audio from all of the episodes at that location. That's so secondmillennium.net.
Right. Yeah. 145 episodes. If you don't count this one, I think hopefully this one will at least be a reminder to folks of what we did.
146 main episodes, and then
lots of bonus, right?
A few dozen bonus episodes. Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what Apple Podcasts, which just numbers them all sequentially. I don't know what they're up to. I should check that sometime, but it could be 200 by now. So
wow. Well, in that sense, Apple taking over our account might be fruitful. At least it sounds good.
It sounds good. Well, we don't need to lean on that too hard.
Okay, no, amen. Yeah.
That's all right.
Hey, really good to talk with you today and always, Paul.
Yeah.
And
You too, Bill.
yeah, blessings to you and to our listeners and to all of our guests, etc.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yes,
my own
until
thanks.
we meet again.
Until we meet again. Yes, indeed. All the best.
All the best. God bless to all of you.
Yes, God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's So Second Millennium. TSSM's audio producer is Morgan Burkhardt. Our theme music, Igneous Grok, was composed and performed by Ben Marquardt. For my co-host Bill Schmitt, I'm Paul Giesting. Until next time.